In this tutorial, we are going to learn how to get the sheet tab names that we have down the bottom here and the associated ID numbers up the top here, which you can find at the end of the URL here. We're going to do this in the Sheets API Advanced service rather than the Spreadsheet app service. So why are we doing this? One of the unfortunate drawbacks of using the Sheets API Advanced service is that in some cases it requires us to use the sheet tab name, and then in other circumstances it requires us to use the ID of the sheet. So it's a really good idea at the start of any large Sheets API process to grab the full list of all the sheet names and their associated IDs. Now, this is a sample starter sheet here. I have a bunch of astronauts here. I've separated those astronauts into different names and what they all do, and I've got a small notes section on the side here. So we're going to grab each one of these sheet tab names and their associated IDs. Now, if you want to play along, and I encourage that you do, you can grab a copy of the starter sheet in the link in the description below, or from the written tutorial, which is also in the description below. So once you've made a copy of the sheet, head over to Extensions and App Scripts and make sure that you already have this Sheets service here. So if you're playing along, you should already have this Sheets service, Advanced service up. But if you don't, you can go and add a service here by clicking the plus button, scrolling down until you find Google Sheets, which is already here, so it won't be in this list. Make sure you're in the correct version and make sure it says Sheets and you're good to go. Cool bananas. Okay, let's get cracking. So in your starter sheet on the right hand side here, you can see I've already got a test function which is called runsies, and we need to put in a spreadsheet ID. Now, if we have a bound sheet, we can always go const ssid is equal to spreadsheet app get active, I suppose, or get active spreadsheet. It's a bit more verbose but more clear. And then you could say get ID. So we're combining both the Spreadsheet app service and the Sheets API Advanced service. But alternatively, we can just go up here and grab the ID of the sheet in the URL bar up the top here, hit Control-C to copy, and whack that bad boy in here. Now yours, of course, is going to be different to mine because you've made your own copy. Cool. So once we have the Spreadsheet ID, that's going to then be a parameter of this function called getSheetNames and IDs, and that will run our little script that we're about to build. Let's clear this and hit tab. So the first thing we might do is something like this. So I'm going to go through the process of how I would build this out, and then it'll modify a bit, and then we'll see the end result. So for me, I might go something like const RESP for response, not RESPECT, but that is a fantastic song nonetheless. We will go sheets and then spreadsheets and then get, and get is going to retrieve all the metadata and all the data about the spreadsheet, including the sheets and their associated names. So for us, this can take 1 to 2 parameters. In our first run through, we're just going to provide one parameter, which is going to be the sheet's ID. And let's go ahead and do that now. So we've got SSID and plug that bad boy in. All right, our next task then is going to be console log. And if we just go console log the response here and see what magic happens, I suppose we'll get an error because it'll return sheets and nothing's going to happen. That's all good. Let's actually just go return. What do we want to return? We'll say sheets, but sheets hasn't been defined yet. So we will get an error, but we'll also get this console log first. Let's hit save. And if we're running the first time, we can go through authorization.
A few moments later.
There it is. Okay, and we'll hit review permissions. Click continue. Okay, something's happened here already. Well, my bad, we started running this directly without the spreadsheet ID. We want to actually run runsies. Let's hit run again. There we are, crisis averted, success. So you can see here now that we have a big amount of data all here, and we've got some sheets with properties and sub-properties inside those sheets. We've also got the time zone, some default information, the title of the spreadsheet, and so on and so forth. Now, if we just return this back every time, this is a pretty large payload to receive over the internet, right? So it's going to slow down our processes. And oftentimes when we're using the Sheets API with AppScript, we are trying to improve performance. So we need to narrow things down and decide what items we need to extract from this overall object just to go back to us. So what we're going to do is we'll have a look at this console log again. So it's, where are we, up here? And let's just go JSON.stringify. And this will turn it into a string to make it a bit easier for us to read. But we need to format the string. So we're going to say null, and then we're going to put a little how we want each line to be separated by a space, and then close our outer brackets and hit save and run again. Now you can see this is a very big object. So a lot of things were hiding in the object because when we just print out the object, the secondary levels of properties are hidden, but now we can actually see them exploded out. So we can see here there's a property here called sheets, and this is going to contain our sheet names and titles and so on. So if I just scroll this up a bit, let's see if we can Control F and find a title. Okay, so there's a title here, and we've also got a sheet ID here. So we want to get these two items only out of each of these properties. The sheets property is actually an array, and that is an array of these properties here. So what we can actually do is create a payload for our Sheets.Spreadsheet.get method. And let's just go up here and create the payload. So const payload, don't know why I did that, const payload is equal to, that's going to be an object, and inside that object we're going to use something called fields. The term fields is a shorthand for field masks, and field masks allow us to extract only information that we want to receive back from the API. So that will significantly improve the performance of the Sheets API return. So we know from the execution log that we need to go into Sheets. So that is the first property of the object. So let's just close that. So we need to say Sheets. And then we know inside Sheets we have an array. So let's have a look again. Sheets, there's an array, we can tell by the square braces. So we can identify Sheets as a field mask with the curved braces. Now inside that, yet again, we need to find the sheet ID and the title. So where was that? Back to execution logs. We'll use this again. We can see it's under the properties. I paused on that because saying properties is weird. But yes, it's under the properties. And we just want to extract the title. And what is the other one? It's holding out on me. Scroll up a bit, we might be able to find it. It should be the sheet ID. There, here, sheet ID. We also need that, okay? So inside our array, we want to go into properties dot sheet ID, comma, and we also want to extract properties dot title. Cool. So now our payload will load into the second argument of our get method, and we should see some things a little bit differently in our console log now. So hit save, hit run. Okay, success. Now you can see we've limited what we're getting back, and now we have an array of all these properties of sheet ID and title for each one of these sheet tabs in our spreadsheet. Great. Okay, so let's do a bit of admin on this now, and we'll put everything inside a try and catch statement. Okay, so the catch is going to need an error. I usually define that as E, which is common practice. And then we will grab, let me see, let's grab all of this and alt this up into here and hit tab. So now it'll make an attempt to get this, and if any error occurs, it's going to do something in this catch statement. Now we've got two options in our catch statement to return. We could console log an error or console error something, and that's not going to break the script. It will just allow us to continue on. So we could say console.error. And that will actually sort of come up as a red doobly-doo in our script. We'll explain that in a minute. We could say error, retrieving sheet name and ID. Had to put the S in. I'm not a snake. And then we'll log the error. I think you can actually go error.message. Message. See how that goes. Okay. Another alternative would be something like this. We could throw an error and that will actually break the script. So here, instead of console error, we could say throw new error. Too many R's. Okay, let's hit save. And this time around, we'll just, let's just not run runsies. We'll run directly here because we know then that variable will not exist. And that should throw this error, right? So let's hit run. Oh, 28. Sorry, E. We used E here as our parameter. Wasn't even listening to my own advice. Okay, and hit run. Awesome. So let's scroll down a bit. Is it e-message? Maybe let's try just the error. Okay, 6.5 dozen there. Okay, so we'll just keep that as E maybe. It's fine. We could put message into, I guess. Okay, so these are our two options now that we throw. So we could go to our execution log here. On the first time around, so we have made an error because we don't know what the SSID is. So we console log the error retrieving the sheet name, and this happens. Then the script continues on to the throw new error, then it actually stops the script. So if you wanted to continue your script, even though an error occurs, you keep the top one and comment out the bottom one. Or if you want to just break the script, you can comment out the top one and throw the new error. Let's throw the new error. Nice. All right, the last bit we need to do before we create this sheets. If we have a look at our execution, so I'm just going to quickly save and let's rerun. So right now, this isn't probably all that useful when we are playing with it for other processes in our script. So we want to just reduce this down to perhaps an array containing just the sheet ID and the title for each one, and get rid of this properties, get rid of this sheet statement here as well. So let's go ahead and do that. So underneath here, we're going to go const sheets, and that's going to be equal to the response. And we know from our log that we need to burrow into sheets here. So we'll say response sheets, and then we're going to map this. So map is a functional programming iterator in JavaScript that will allow us to iterate through each one of the values in the array and do something with it. And what we're going to do is create a function inside here. So it will be an arrow function, and we're going to say sheet, and then a little arrow function here. And what do we want to extract? We want to extract the sheet properties. Okay, so to explain that, so on each iteration of this array, so this is one iteration here, this is another iteration here, we want to burrow into properties and just return back these values here. So let's go and say sheet.properties. Hit save. And now this will return our sheets, and we should see this console logged in our runsies function here if we've behaved ourselves. Let's go ahead and hit run. There it is here. We made it, we did it, we're amazing. Okay, so now we have our titles for each one of our sheet tabs and then the sheet IDs as well, ready for us to play with in our next part of our script function. Now, one final thing before we go is let me show you how this works in a larger Sheets API script. Now, in another tutorial that you can find on my website, I have a script where I'm archiving data from rows and removing it from one sheet and then archiving it into another. Now, this required me to have both the sheet tab name and the sheet ID. So the first thing I did as part of this process, which you can see here, so this is my archive where things are archived away, and this is the sheet that I'm referencing. So as part of, and here you can see I have a class called SSRec, and in that I have a bunch of methods. I also have a constructor, which inside this constructor, I'm actually calling this same response here, this Sheets.Spreadsheet.get, which you can see right here. And you can see I've got the ID and also the payload here. Now, part of this payload, you can see, also includes the sheet properties title and the sheet properties ID. I also retrieved the properties time zone for another part of the process. And I set this up to only occur on the first time that we make a call to the Sheets API. So if it's called for the first time, then we want to store all this information so we don't have to continue to call it over and over and over again. So once we've made this call, you can see then again, we grab this Sheets list and we've got the results, Sheets map, and we do the same sort of thing with map and get the properties, exactly what we did here. So this is a great time saver. It reduces the processes of a large Sheets API process and allows us to work in a more performant manner. That's it for grabbing the Sheet tab IDs and their titles from Google Sheets using the Sheets API Advanced service. If you've enjoyed this tutorial, please hit that like button. And if you want to see more tutorials like this, subscribe. Until next time.